Welcome back to another explainer. Let's jump right into this one because today we are cracking open a seriously chilling paranormal case file. We are going to deconstruct a highly documented, absolutely terrifying night at London's incredibly famous and famously luxurious Langham Hotel. More specifically, we are looking at the nightmare that unfolded in room 333. Now, if you think you know exactly how ghost stories usually go, prepare to have your expectations completely subverted. We're going to see what happens when strict, unyielding logic violently collides with something utterly inexplicable, and we'll explore the intense psychological toll that true terror takes on an evidence-based mind.
So what actually happens when a strictly logical mind steps into the world's most haunted hotel room? To really understand this case, we have to get to know our subject, Annie. She was a 25-year-old British journalist who traveled down to London to shoot a documentary on paranormal investigations. What makes her perspective so absolutely crucial here is her mindset. She was not a believer at all. She was strictly logical, entirely evidence-based, and had literally built her career on investigating and debunking fake haunted locations. Her plan for the Langham Hotel was simple: spend one night in their most notorious room, record every single second to prove there was nothing there, and move on to the next case. For her, this was just another day at the office.
But why room 333 specifically? Well, according to the hotel lore, years ago, a Victorian doctor and his new wife checked into this exact room for their honeymoon. But it didn't end in romance. The doctor brutally murdered his wife inside the room and then took his own life. Ever since that horrific event, the legend says the spirit of the doctor relentlessly wanders the confines of room 333. And that is the heavy, grim history that Annie was walking straight into, armed with absolutely nothing but her camera equipment and a rock-solid skepticism.
The unease actually began the second she arrived, and the contrast was incredibly striking. Downstairs, the bustling hotel lobby was exactly what you'd expect from a luxury spot. Soft carpets, massive antique paintings, a super warm atmosphere. But the very moment Annie handed over her booking confirmation for room 333, the receptionist's welcoming smile completely vanished. I mean, her face went pale, her hands just stopped moving. And incredibly, in an era where every hotel uses digital key cards, she handed Annie an old-fashioned physical key. When Annie finally reached the dead third floor, the bustling hotel vibe just died completely. The corridor was totally empty. The wall lamps were incredibly dim, casting these deep yellow shadows everywhere, and the old floorboards loudly creaked under every single step. It felt like a completely abandoned wing of the building.
Try to put yourself in her shoes for a second as she reaches the end of that creepy corridor. The door to room 333 is made of this dark, polished wood. But it's the heavy brass handle that really stands out. It is unnaturally, fiercely cold to the touch. When she pushes the door open, she isn't greeted by the warmth of a luxury suite. She is just swallowed by darkness. Once she fumbles for the switch, the Victorian-style decor finally reveals itself. There's a massive king-size bed, an antique dressing table, and, honestly, most unsettling of all, a prominent, full-length mirror mounted directly on the wall, facing the bed.
Despite the creeping dread she's starting to feel, Annie's training kicks right in. She immediately establishes control over her environment, basically using logic as a psychological shield against the unknown. Even after a really loud, unexplained noise startles her, her suitcase just randomly falling over out in the hallway, she calmly unpacks her gear. We can see her systematic setup leaves absolutely nothing to chance. Tripod positioning is locked in. Camera rolling, microphone activation confirmed, voice recorder checked. She orders a simple sandwich for dinner, lights a small fire in the fireplace to fight off the November chill, and sits down at her laptop. In her mind, she is completely and entirely in control.
Let's look at the timeline of the night's progression, because what starts as a quiet evening slowly shifts into a complete nightmare. After setup and research in the evening, she inadvertently drifts off to sleep, with the camera quietly rolling in the background. The room is quiet, the fire is crackling, but this piece is violently interrupted, because right at midnight, the first knock happens. And by 1 a.m., the horrifying mirror attack. So, let's break down that midnight awakening. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoes through the quiet room. Annie wakes up, totally groggy and disoriented. Then comes a second knock, and a man's voice clearly says, "Your room service, madam." The impossibility of this immediately sets off alarm bells in her logical brain. I mean, she had ordered one sandwich hours ago, and it had already been delivered and eaten. She definitely hasn't ordered anything else. Super confused, she walks to the door and looks through the peephole. Standing out there in the dim corridor is a butler, holding a silver tray completely covered by a large domed lid.
Annie opens the door and politely tells the guy there's obviously been a mistake, but the man insists the order is for her. Without another word, he lifts the large lid off the tray, revealing something deeply, deeply horrifying. Sitting right there on that silver platter, staring blankly back at her, is Annie's own severed head. It's a moment of absolute cognitive dissonance. Her brain simply cannot process the sheer impossibility of what she is looking at. A visceral, terrified scream rips from her throat, and she instinctively squeezes her eyes shut. But when she snaps them back open just a second later, the butler is gone, the tray is gone, the dim corridor is just stretching out before her, completely and utterly empty.
Panicking, she slams the door shut. Now, this is exactly where the logical journalist desperately tries to find an anchor. She runs straight to her equipment to review the recordings. But if we compare her expected evidence with the actual recording, it just doesn't match reality. She checks the camera, expecting video of the hallway, but the memory card, which was previously working perfectly, is now completely corrupted. Impossible. She checks the voice recorder, fully expecting to hear the knocking and the butler's voice. Instead, the audio is horrifyingly empty. There are no knocks, there is no man speaking. There is literally only the mechanical click of the door opening, followed by her own blood-curdling screams. Her evidence-based reality is officially crumbling.
By 1 a.m., logic is completely failing her. The profound fragility of the human psyche is totally exposed when reality breaks down this fast. Despite the fire still burning in the hearth, the temperature in the room plummets dramatically. Trying to ground herself, Annie rushes into the bathroom to just splash some cold water on her face. She looks up into the mirror, and standing directly behind her is a terrifying figure. A rotting Victorian man dressed in tattered clothing with impossibly long nails has appeared right there in the mirror, and he is reaching out, his hands moving slowly toward her throat. It's the doctor from the stories. She wildly spins around, but the bathroom behind her is empty. He only exists in the reflection.
At this point, the skepticism is gone. Pure survival instinct takes over. Annie realizes she has to get out of room 333 immediately. She throws her gear into her bags, races to the dark wood door, and grabs that freezing brass handle. She pulls, she twists, she yanks. But why wouldn't the door open? Because it's locked tight from the outside. She is totally trapped. And just as the panic fully sets in, the heavy Victorian lights of the room begin to violently flicker and pop.
In the strobe-like flashing of those dying lights, the entity actually physically manifests in the room with her. The rotting man is no longer just trapped in the mirror. He is physically there. His skin is deathly pale. His eyes are this piercing, unnatural yellow. And with every single flicker of the lights, he is moving closer and closer. Annie retreats back all the way into a corner, just screaming at the top of her lungs for anyone to please help her.
Meanwhile, the hotel staff's discovery is unfolding. Staff on the floor below hear her terrified screams. First, they rush up to the third floor and literally physically break down the door to room 333, fully expecting to find an attacker. But second, they find the room is completely empty. There is no rotting Victorian man. There is no intruder at all. But third, their blood runs cold as they look into the bathroom. They find Annie, screaming in absolute agony, violently and repeatedly smashing her own head into the shattered shards of the full-length mirror.
The staff managed to restrain her, pulling her away from the glass just as she passed out. When Annie finally woke up in the hotel's medical room, battered and stitched up, she tearfully tried to explain the attack. She swore the terrifying man had grabbed her by the back of the head and was forcefully slamming her face into the mirror. But then, a senior hotel staff member revealed a chilling piece of history to her. That brutal action, the doctor's method of smashing the victim's head into the glass, was the exact, precise way the Victorian doctor had murdered his wife in that very room, decades ago. Annie survived her night at the Langham Hotel. Her physical wounds eventually healed up. But you have to imagine the psychological scar of having her entire, evidence-based worldview shattered like that. That will likely never leave her. She went in with cameras, recorders, and an ironclad belief in logic, and she left in an ambulance. It leaves us with a deeply unsettling question to wrap up this explainer. When we strip away all our technological safety nets and we are forced to face the truly inexplicable in the dark, can human logic ever really protect us from the supernatural? Really makes you wonder. Thanks for walking through this case file with me, and we'll see you in the next explainer.